Palestine, the land of a people with a history that spans 4,000 years, a history rooted in rich traditions of trade and agriculture, industry and art, at the crossroads of Asia, Europe and Africa. Its vibrant and prosperous cities, Jaffa, Safed, Acca and Haifa, were the beating heart of Palestine's thriving ports and factories, cinema and theatre. But in 1897, Zionism, an ideology born in Europe, sought to create a legally secure homeland for Jewish people in Palestine, threatening a millennia of multi-faith and multicultural Palestinian existence and identity. In 1917, during the First World War, the Imperial British government turned that Zionist aim into a reality by publicly pledging the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, an Arab land of strategic importance for the colonial power. The Balfour Declaration is condemned by Palestinians to this day as being immoral and illegal. In 1947, the United Nations weighed in, agreeing to split historic Palestine, which was under British mandate, into Jewish and Arab territories. Jerusalem was granted special international status, but that didn't stop the Nakba, or the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, upon which the State of Israel was created and now stands. Between 1947 and 1949, Jewish paramilitary forces destroyed and captured almost 530 Palestinian villages and cities. More than 750,000 Palestinians were expelled from their land. Neither they nor their descendants have been allowed to return to this day, in blatant disregard for international law. In 1967, Israel seized the rest of historic Palestine. It illegally occupies the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip, through a system of discrimination and segregation, entrenching Jewish supremacy over Palestinian lives, a system that UN experts have called apartheid. Then came the Oslo Accords, described as Palestinian Versailles by renowned academic Edward Said, an agreement that gave Palestinians limited self-rule in parts of occupied West Bank, while Israel had total military control over the majority of the area. It imposed Israel's total security and economic control over Palestinian lives, instead of resolving the fundamental question of Palestinian statehood and an end to Israel's illegal occupation. Today, Israel's illegal occupation is more entrenched and more violent. Today, the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians continues in real time. Today, Israel is waging a war on Gaza that's unprecedented in its scale, its brutality, and its devastation. Today, after 76 years of Nakba, Israel's genocide in Gaza unfolds before the eyes of the world, 365 days on. Antony Loewenstein is the author of The Palestine Laboratory. It's a book on Israel's arms and surveillance industry. He's joining us from Sydney. Thank you very much indeed, sir, for being with us. I want to ask you to help me with some context, first of all. Benjamin Netanyahu has repeatedly said that if somebody is not with Israel, they are anti-Semitic. How strong is the feeling amongst Jews around the world that Israel represents them when it particularly comes to conflicts like Gaza?
The sad reality is that in the last decades, anti-Semitism has been weaponized. What I mean by that is that anti-Semitism is real. There's attacks against Jews and synagogues, and it's a problem, and in fact, it's growing in some parts of the world. But what has happened, partly pushed by the Israeli government, by pro-Israel groups, by certain Jewish groups globally, in the US and elsewhere, is this aim of trying to delegitimize anybody, Jewish or otherwise, who is critical of Israel, who is anti-Zionist, such as myself, and I'm a Jewish Australian German. And the problem with that is, of course, that if you make no difference between anti-Zionism and Zionism, then anyone who criticizes Israel is therefore criticized as anti-Semitic. I mean, it's an absurd situation, and we've seen in the last year, since October 7, real legitimate criticisms of Israel's genocide in Gaza and now increasing attacks across the Middle East. And the idea that that should be dismissed as anti-Semitism actually makes the real fight against real anti-Semitism so much harder.
We were mentioning before, of course, the 100 Israelis that have been taken captive on October the 7th, still being held inside Gaza. Given the level of violence, the level of military activity we've seen by Israel in southern Lebanon, and obviously the tension between Israel and Iran now, are there concerns, do you think, that people are losing sight of the fact that those captives are still there and that a ceasefire in Gaza is now essentially off the table?
I mean, Netanyahu, frankly, doesn't overly care about the hostages, and it's frankly unclear how many Israeli Jewish hostages are still alive. My understanding is it's far less than 100. I mean, ultimately, there are Israeli Jews and others who are angered and distraught by the fact that there's been no real priority on getting those hostages out. There's no ceasefire deal on the table with Hamas. There's no ceasefire deal on the table with Hezbollah either, for that matter. And I think ultimately it really shows that the Israeli military mindset, often supported by vast parts of the Israeli public, is war is the answer. This is what they claim. And what's been so disturbing as someone who is Jewish, although not religious, is that none of these activities, Gaza, the West Bank occupation, Syria, Yemen, Lebanon, none of these are making Israel and, more importantly, Jews safer. In fact, it's the opposite. All these actions are making lives for Jews and obviously Palestinians and other Arabs and Muslims far more unsafe globally. And there really has been, I think, in the last years, but it's accelerated after October 7. There's really a civil war of sorts going on in the Jewish community globally. And what I mean by that very briefly is that there are some very hardline pro-Israel groups, the AIPACs of this world, that support Israel right or wrong. But there are growing numbers of Jews, particularly young Jews, who are fundamentally opposed to what Israel stands for, about its genocide against occupation, saying occupation is not a Jewish value. The idea of endless war is not a Jewish value. This is against the fundamental tenets of Judaism, or frankly any religion. And because other people, including my family who were killed in the Holocaust, the idea that this is our legacy decades on, that Israel is known and seen to perpetuate endless occupation and brutality against Palestinians, is shameful. And many, many young Jews increasingly turn against that and speak out.
Antony Loewenstein, we appreciate you being with us. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much.